911, what's the location of the emergency?
Man, there's a fire going on right now.
What's the location?
723 Swope.
Okay, is that a
please come fast, please.
Apartment?
It's a house.
What's the phone number you're calling from?
I don't know, man. We just need fire department.
What is your name?
Don Yeagley, I'm the owner.
You said DeAndre?
Don,
tell me exactly what happened, Don.
I just went inside my house, and my room in the corner had a fire. Okay. I tried to put it out, but the smoke got too thick.
Okay. I have the call.
And it's still rolling out.
Okay, I'm gonna get some questions from you, but the fire department's already getting started. Okay, how many floors or stories are there?
Two. Okay. 2 stories. Fuck. God damn it.
You're doing a good job. I'm entering some notes here.
That was my house.
All units responding 723-723 Swope Avenue. Report of the home on fire, but all they're seeing is light smoke at this time.
Dispatch, all responding companies. Agent 7's arrived on scene of a working structure fire and a 1-story wood frame single-family residence. No smoke shown from the office side. Agent 7 will be investigating. Agent 7's got a water supply. All the companies continue in the state.
Steve Wilch, Battalion 1 C Shift. I was the incident commander on the Swope structure fire in February 2023. I arrived along with Truck 1 just after Engine 7 had given their size up that this would be a working structure fire, smoke showing from the office side. They were unable to gain access to the property because of a locked gate. Truck 1 forced through that gate. This was just one of many obstacles we would encounter while fighting this fire. My initial assignments was for Engine 7 to be fire attack, stretched to the Alpha side, shoulder the load while their officer completed a 360. Truck 1 would be 2-vent, Engine 6 was backup, and Truck 8 was Rick. We faced multiple obstacles during this fire that delayed gaining fire under control. It was a fire in the basement. We were unable to locate the fire through exterior windows, therefore unable to perform a transitional attack. Truck 1 had made entry onto the first floor reporting moderate smoke and low heat, and as they made their way to the basement, they reported hoarding conditions. The hose line was stretched to the room of origin in the basement, and when they were unable to get water on the seat of the fire continued to smolder and generate heat. At one point, Truck 1 reported a small explosion. The homeowner had many compressed gas cylinders not only in the room of origin, but in the basement. The El Paso County Assessor's Office has this house listed as less than 2,000 square feet. If this was a typical fire, we'd have it out in 3 to 5 minutes. This one was atypical, and we had many obstacles. But through very effective communication between the interior crews and myself, the IC, I was able to gather important information on heat, smoke, and fire conditions, which allowed me to move firefighters in and out of position to successfully bring this fire under control.
This is Hollis Stanley. I was hired back Lieutenant of Engine 7, day of the Swope fire. We ended up being first due. On arrival, we had light smoke coming out of the front door, nothing else visible from the street. We stopped at a hydrant, a couple houses down up on the corner. Small houses, small yards, so still a very easy stretch, even being a couple houses down. Truck 1 arrived, forced the gate. Once the gate was open, we had an RP inside saying it was a basement fire, inside the gate saying it was a basement fire. I got a 360. Really the only thing of note was still just that smoke from the front door. Nothing else. No smoke coming from any other parts of the structure. So we made access inside. We had moderate smoke, no heat on the first floor. Found the basement stairs easy enough. We had decent enough visibility if you got low. Made the stairs, made the basement, still moderate smoke and no heat in the basement. Truck 1 Irons was already down there. When we got down there, there was extreme hoarder conditions, some of the worst I've seen. And on top of that, very narrow hallways. So once we got down there, everybody was pretty much stuck in the position they were in. You couldn't move past one another. There was no bumping up or down the line. Lieutenant Royal had made the fire room. Paramedic Romero made the fire room behind him. At one point during the fire attack, we did have a small explosion. It was obvious it was, either a small cylinder or a cylinder with very little pressure left in it. It was, nothing huge, but certainly something alarming enough. We all turned around to start to exit. And as we started doing that, I think we all we all realized that there wasn't any real change to conditions. It was still moderate smoke, low to no heat, and nothing further was happening. We didn't have any further explosions. Nothing was progressing due to this. So I think we were all comfortable with staying put at that point, continued to make fire attack. Not too long after that, I was low on air. The fourth class firefighter next to me was low on air. So we were both on amber. I notified command that we were getting a little low. We needed a crew to come move up and take over the attack line. Command requested the backup line take over. They were actually interior at the top of the stairs. And so they were also getting lower on air and unable to bump up and take over the attack line. We gave another minute and a half. Starting to become obvious that there wasn't anybody else available to come take that line from us, and our air was just getting lower. So at that point, decided we were going to go ahead and evacuate. And as we were coming up the stairs, command had reached the same decision and ordered everybody to evacuate. I had a few lessons learned on this fire. The first one was on the 360. When I got to the Charlie side, I had extensive modifications, amateur modifications, plywood and 2x4s and such. I noted that, but I didn't air anything over the radio. It was distant from where the fire was. It wasn't affected at the moment. And because of that, I just kind of put it in the back of my brain and moved on. When we got inside, we found similar modifications interior. In retrospect, I think I probably should have aired that information over the radio. Would have painted a better picture of the structure and what we might be going inside to. The second one, we had a bit of a delay in starting to evacuate when that explosion happened. So the Truck 1 Irons firefighter ended up closest to the stairs at the very back of this whole row of people that we had downstairs. And Truck 1 Irons officer, Lieutenant Royal, was all the way up front with 3 people in between the two of them. So when this explosion happened, we all turned to start moving out, and the Truck 1 Irons firefighter refused to move because he wanted to make sure that he had Lieutenant Royal with him, which was perfect, right? So just something to think of, that the accountability bit is good. It's extremely important, but we also got to consider, especially in those tight hallways like we had, whether or not we're impeding anybody else's ability to evacuate.
This is Ryan Royal. I was a lieutenant on Truck 1 for this fire. We arrived at this fire about a block or two behind Engine 7. We had an immediate delay just from a forcible entry issue at the front. The main driveway had double swinging, like 6-foot chain link gates. When we got up to him, the occupant was actually standing behind the fence looking through at us, really not saying much, and was not unlocking the chains. So we ended up doing a typical hinge force on that gate system on the post there, and we're able to drop the entire section out of the way. I only got about a 2.5 sided view of the structure. At that point, the hose line was just stretched and held dry. When I laid down on the front porch, I had pretty typical basement fire smoke. It was brown. It wasn't very turbulent. It was a foot or two off the floor, a little bit disorganized. I could see inside, only a few feet, and could tell that we had quite a bit of clutter at the entry point. I held at the top of the staircase and asked the Irons firefighter to go back to the front door and direct Engine 7 to our location. We descended down the basement stairs and made it to the downstairs hallway. This is about 5.5 minutes now after arrival that we're working our way through that hallway, and we actually locate the fire room door where you could tell that we had decent smoke conditions on the back side of it. I closed that and waited for Engine 7. This is where things started changing just a little bit. That door into the fire room would only open about 16 or 18 inches. The other thing I noted as I was going in is the piles of hoarding was kind of higher than I could reach with my hand in the crawling position. So we slowed down a little bit at that point. Zero visibility. I had a little bit of heat in that room, but I still had no obvious fire, no obvious glow to at all give us a hint of what we were looking for. I still couldn't see fire without the tick, but with the tick I could see that there was some fire going up the wall and then rolling across the top of the ceiling. So water on the fire was at 9 minutes and 43 seconds after arrival. This is where the conditions and kind of the whole part of this fire that was non-typical for us started to show itself. When I opened the line and flowed, the fire would actually increase to the point where it would become visible with water application and then kind of flare up the walls and then overhead a little bit. I tried that twice with the same reaction, and so I just backed up for a second to the door shut the line down, and just sat to see if I could watch what was going on and try to put together if maybe I was missing something. We attempted to enter that room with the hose line and flow somewhere between 4 to 6 times. And each time, no matter how much we flowed or how we changed the angle of the line, we had immediate increases in fire activity. At that point, eh, things weren't adding up to me. I wasn't super comfortable with the progress we were making. I want to be clear that I was still not feeling like we were in a bad position because the conditions would only increase with water. It's not like we were getting turbulent smoke that was feeding into the hallway where the guys were. It was just with water application. So we backed up to the door. We isolated the door for the second, and we decided to make one more entry and really try to keep the line flowing longer and overcome whatever the issue was. The second I did that, I went back in with the line. I opened it up and had an immediate explosion, which it was small and definitely resembled something like a small propane or MAP gas or butane bottle, like the Coleman camping stoves. It wasn't a large container, but it exploded and caused an increase in the fire again in the room, and obviously an extremely loud change right in front of me there. That was kind of the final straw for me at that point to back out into the hall, really give good communication outside to command and let them know these non-typical things that we were encountering. And between the discussions there over the next couple minutes, we started to get low on air at about the 18-minute mark, and that's when command decided to evacuate the building. At that point, we had decided to re-enter. We re-entered the building, and we went back downstairs about the 23-minute mark from arrival, and essentially for the next 10 minutes attempted the same type of attacks going into that room to see if we couldn't get the fire knocked down. We were just not able to overcome whatever the issue was with what was fueling this fire, whether it was gas or propane or burning liquids on the floor. We just couldn't pinpoint to it, and visibility wasn't good enough for us to put that whole picture together. And so 34 minutes in, we ended up exiting the structure for a second time. It actually was decided that they were going to flow and hit that basement fire room from a front alpha side window. This ended up being the final hit that put this fire out. We never did get it fully out from the inside. When I look back at it, I think it was great as far as crews all slowed down when we recognized we had something pretty atypical. And then I think everybody involved, specifically the interior crews that I was around, stayed really calm. And that helped us communicate clearly to the outside. It let us kind of go back and forth with our attack and then put ourselves in a good spot and kind of keep our heads cool and decide what was the best way to handle this. I think the bad side of this fire for truck one was it was such bad hoarding conditions and it was such unique fire activity that it delayed our search. Obviously, that's a big part of our priority usually, and we don't typically get distracted with any other tasks. This one, just by the nature of it and the what we were starting to find was a little increase in risk in the structure of disorientation and the fire activity. We delayed that search until we had a decent handle on what was going on with the fire before primaries were done on both of those.
This is Josh Bartlett, Battalion Chief 2, 2nd Arriving Battalion Chief on the Swope Fire. I made face-to-face contact with Incident Command, who is Battalion Chief 1 Welch. My initial assignments was to do a 360, make face-to-face with the crews around the structure, and give him a CAN report. This was a very difficult fire to find the seat of the fire due to the hoarding conditions and the reinforced security that the homeowner had placed on the building. The coordination and communication between the crews led to the success of finding the seat of the fire with extinguishment from the external side. Working directly with the safety officers and hazmat, we were also able to determine the safest possible way to attack the fire. At one point, having to pull crews out, ensure we were making the right attack, and then putting the crews back in. Another thing that went well was the crews recognizing that they were working and they had reached amber and they were needing to come out, thus allowing incident command to find the ability to replace those units and continue with the fire attack. This was a difficult fire to find the seat of this fire and took a lot of communication from the crews to ensure the success of this fire and the safety of all the individuals on the scene. As you look through the pictures and the videos that you may see of this fire, many of the people on this scene said it was one of the worst hoarding conditions they had of a structure, interior and exterior of the building, with multiple people living inside that structure and outside the structure. This fire is a good example of watching the crews have patience and perseverance to find success.
Hi, my name is John Roy. I'm at Station 14 with the Hazardous Materials team. So I wanted to take a quick moment to talk about compressed gas cylinders, particularly propane, and how they should be dealt with on a structure fire. So first things first, when we look at these cylinders, I think that there's a lot of maybe fear that these are going to explode catastrophically if they're exposed to any type of fire. The first thing that I'll say is that there's safety mechanisms that are built into these propane tanks, and I'll show that right now. So your standard modern propane cylinder is going to have a relief valve at the back of this handle here. That relief valve, if the pressure of this tank is exceeded, will automatically go off. So provided that that relief valve is functioning the way that it's supposed to, it would be very rare for this tank to explode. With that being said, there are possibilities of it exploding. The first possibility would be, let's say the relief valve's not working. If pressure builds up, you could have an explosion. That's very rare. However, more likely in a structure fire, if we have direct flame impingement on this propane tank and it exceeds the capability of the relief valve, you could have a boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion or a blevy. So real quick, just wanted to talk about what do we do if we encounter a propane tank like this inside of a structure on a structure fire. First things first, if I hear any sort of hissing or I know that that relief valve is engaged or I have direct flames coming out of it, the first thing that I want to do is try to cool that container off. I want to put direct water on the tank to start cooling the tank so that we don't have a blevy. The second thing to consider is in the hazmat program, we'll actually deliberately flare these tanks to empty them a lot of the times because burning that product gets rid of the gas in the air. So it's not necessarily a concern for us in the external environment to have fire coming out of one of these. It is more of a concern on the inside. So you cool the tank off first. The second thing you'd want to consider doing is pulling your crew out, much like they did on Swope, and reevaluating. In that period of time where you're evaluating, if there's direct flame impingement to these, there is a possibility of a blevy. If there's not direct flame impingement and you just have a leak in the system, it's possible that the tank is just going to bleed itself off. Either scenario gets rid of the concern of having a compressed gas in the environment. After the fact though, what we'd want to consider doing is going back in that environment and doing air monitoring and ventilation, which is exactly what happened at Swope. They ended up ventilating the kitchen area over the top of the basement so that they could visualize and ventilate. And then hazmat went in with our meters and we basically did air monitoring in the environment. So step one is cool the tank off. Step two, if that's not having the effect that you desired or you deem it to be too dangerous, pull out. Step three would be reevaluate with command, and step four would be if the container's failed or if the product is lost, go back in, do air monitoring, and make sure that that environment is safe.